The wedding dress shimmered like morning dew, every pearl hand-stitched through sleepless nights, every seam carrying my hope that Fiona would smile when she wore it. I had poured my heart into that gown, believing it would be a gift of love, a symbol that family still mattered. But when I delivered it to Aunt Marlene's doorstep, she didn't thank me. She didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, her words cut sharper than any blade. "Don't worry, Ocean. We'll just tell everyone it came from an international designer." I stood frozen, holding back tears, realizing my work, my effort, my very existence could be erased with one cruel sentence. My name is Ocean, and if stories of betrayal and justice resonate with you, subscribe now to follow this true tale of pain and revenge. For as long as I can remember, I was the one who filled in the gaps for my family. I planned birthdays that sparkled with detail, cooked meals for holidays when no one else bothered, and sat by my grandmother's bedside through nights when her breathing was shallow and uneven. I believed, perhaps naively, that love was transactional in the best way, that the more you gave, the more you'd be cherished in return. Every stitch I sewed into Fiona's wedding dress was a thread of that belief. I didn't just see fabric and pearls. I saw family, loyalty, and the kind of devotion that should mean something. Fiona wasn't just my cousin. She was the sister I never had, the one I thought I was building memories with, not wounds. Night after night, I sat at my work table, hunched over under lamplight, letting the hum of the city outside fade into silence. Friends invited me out for drinks, clients pitched me projects that promised exposure and steady paychecks, but I turned them down. The dress always came first. My hands ached, my eyes blurred, but I pressed on, convinced that Fiona would see the gown and know, without me saying a word, how much she meant to me. In my mind, I could already picture the moment her beaming at me across the bridal suite, tears in her eyes, whispering thank you while I adjusted the veil. That's the story I told myself as I stitched every seam. That was the fantasy I clung to when exhaustion made me question why I was giving so much. Family, I reminded myself. Family is worth it. Isn't that what we're taught? That no matter how messy or complicated things get, you put them first? I thought of every sacrifice as an investment in belonging. The nights I skipped networking events, knowing my peers were building connections I could only dream of. The weekends I said no to dates, to adventures, to the possibility of something more, because I believed that creating this dress was more important. Fiona's happiness, I convinced myself, would somehow translate into my own. I imagined myself standing next to her on that wedding day, adjusting her train, handing her tissues, laughing together the way close sisters do. I believed that my love and labor would finally be recognized. But looking back now, I realize I wasn't just sewing beads and lace. I was sewing hope into a garment for someone who never intended to see me as anything more than an afterthought. A week before the wedding, a careless moment ripped the veil off whatever illusion I'd been clinging to. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when my phone buzzed with Mom on the line. I thought I'd call back later, but then I heard Aunt Marlene's voice, low and clipped, threading through the speaker, the kind of voice people use when they're arranging the world without you in it. "Fiona doesn't want Ocean there," she said, as if reading from a carefully edited invitation list. "She thinks Ocean will upstage the bride." For a second, the world tilted. My hands went numb, and the mug slipped from my fingers. Ceramic hit tile and broke into fragments, a tiny, violent punctuation to a sentence I could not believe. My mother's sigh came, through like a closing door. It wasn't a defense. It was an explanation by omission. "We'll handle it," she murmured, the kind of line people use when they want you to stop asking questions. They'd already decided. I'd been discussed, not consulted. It wasn't just hurt. It felt like erasure. To be told you're a problem the family has to manage, an inconvenient variable, to be removed from their idyllic equation, is a kind of violence that doesn't leave a bruise you can show. They weren't angry about anything I'd done. They were threatened by the fact that I existed on my own terms. That thought lodged in my chest and wouldn't let go. All those years of folding my life into theirs, of invisible labor and quiet sacrifices, suddenly read like background noise they could turn off at will. I thought of the nights I stayed home perfecting a pattern while my friends went out, of declining freelance gigs that would have paid well because I needed to finish the gown. I'd imagined standing alongside Fiona as if we were two women who'd been raised to lift each other up. Instead, the family had decided my presence contradicted their narrative of an ideal celebration. The way they talked about me, drama, sensitive, difficult, wasn't an assessment. It was a campaign to rewrite history. Walking through the condo after that call, the city lights felt indifferent. I found myself replaying dinner scenes where my achievements were minimized. The polite nods when I mentioned the condo down payment, the quick pivot back to Fiona's engagement ring, the way praise always landed on her like confetti while I got the cleanup. It wasn't jealousy I felt. It was betrayal, the chill realization that loyalty here was conditional and performative. They applauded for the image, not the person. Anger came in waves, hot, then cold, followed by a strange, pinpoint clarity. If their priority was appearance, then my visibility was the problem. If they could erase me with a sentence and a carefully forwarded guest list, then I had to decide whether I would let them keep rewriting my life. Would I shrink back and pretend none of this mattered so family dinners could remain comfortable? Or would I stop apologizing for being exactly who I am? A creative who builds things people notice, whose work and success are real, even if they don't fit the family's preferred script. The more I thought about it, the more absurd their logic felt. They assumed my presence would steal Fiona's spotlight, as if celebration were a zero-sum game. That assumption begged a question. Why did their image of perfection demand someone else's invisibility? I started to see the pattern, how their praise of Fiona had always been louder, how they'd groomed a narrative where only one daughter could be worthy. My existence, my independence, my career, my condo, paid for with my own labor, threatened the tidy story they'd been telling each other for years. That sting turned into resolve. I stopped making myself small. I documented the messages, saved the group chat, screenshot the passive-aggressive notes. I confided in Isla, who didn't sigh or gaslight me. She listened, validated, and brought Thai food. And that normal human care felt revolutionary. Her response cracked something open inside me. If my family would rather protect an image than love me, then maybe my obligation was not to preserve their comfort but to preserve myself. The choice was no longer theoretical. This was no longer a slight I could sweep under the rug. It was a pattern, and patterns can be named. I could keep performing their role quiet, grateful, erased, or I could stop participating in a story that required my absence. Standing on my balcony that night, watching a cardinal land briefly on the railing and fly away, I felt the first real lightness I'd felt in months. The conflict wasn't only external. It had become internal. Accept the erasure, or claim my space, even if it rattled the family tableau I'd once believed in. It was late, on a Thursday night, when the message arrived, just as I was shutting down my laptop. My phone buzzed with a notification from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Attached was a photo. Fiona's wedding invitation. Glossy and embossed, the kind you frame for memory boxes. At first, I just stared at it, unable to breathe. I'd been told there wasn't room for me, that I would create drama. Yet here was the evidence that space had never been the issue. The card glittered under the camera's flash, but my eyes caught on the smaller text beneath the swirling calligraphy. Due to limited space, This celebration is reserved for only the closest family and friends. My chest tightened. Closest family? I was her only cousin. But the real blow came when my eyes tracked lower, to the design details I knew by heart. Months earlier, I'd sketched out a sample suite of invitations for Fiona. Delicate cream paper, coral accents, and a tiny hidden symbol in the corner, a stylized compass, we joked, represented our true north as kids. That compass had meaning. It was ours. But on this card, the compass was gone. In its place sat the logo of a well-known designer, one I'd admired for years. Someone who charged thousands for her signature stationery. My design hadn't been overlooked, it had been erased, deliberately replaced to prove that my work, like me, didn't belong. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just about being excluded from a party. It was about being scrubbed from a narrative, as though my presence, my creativity, my love for the family had never existed. My sacrifices had been rewritten as irrelevance. Suddenly, the whispers made sense. The comments about me being difficult, the relatives who said I was too sensitive, the sudden cancellations from clients who had once trusted me, all of it traced back to the same source. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a coordinated effort to shrink me until I disappeared. I pressed the photo against the table as if holding it still could steady the fury building inside me. My mind flashed back to the group chat message I had screenshotted weeks before. Aunt Marlene mocking me, good thing we didn't invite Ocean, less drama. At the time, I thought it was cruel gossip. Now I knew it was strategy. Every exclusion, every laugh at my expense, every denial had been part of a pattern designed to strip away my credibility until I had no voice left. For years, I had been silent. I told myself endurance was strength, that family loyalty meant swallowing humiliation and choosing peace. But peace built on erasure isn't peace, it's prison. And staring at that invitation, I realized I was done playing prisoner. I spoke aloud, the words cracking the silence of my apartment. This ends now. Saying it didn't erase the pain, but it shifted something inside me. It was no longer about proving I deserved a seat at their table. It was about refusing to beg for crumbs. The first call I made was to Dana, an old friend from my design circles who had gone into contract law. She answered groggy but attentive, and when I told her everything, the exclusion, the invitation, the erasure of my work, her tone sharpened. They've been using your silence as cover. Don't give them that anymore, she said. Send me every document, every screenshot. We'll build this properly. Her words steadied me like an anchor. For the first time in months, I felt less alone. The second call was to Rick, a former cop I'd met through a freelance project years earlier. I hesitated before dialing, but something about his no-nonsense attitude made me believe he could uncover what others wanted hidden. He listened quietly as I explained, then said, I'll dig. If they've crossed into fraud or defamation, we'll find proof. And proof came faster than I expected. Within a week, Rick traced financial documents that left me shaking with rage. The trust fund my grandfather had set aside for my education money that was supposed to secure my future had been siphoned to fund Fiona's lifestyle, my parents' home renovations, and the very wedding from which I was excluded. Every pearl on her dress, every flower in her centerpiece, was purchased with the foundation of a life I was meant to have. I sat staring at the files Rick forwarded, my pulse pounding. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, a calculated siphoning of my opportunities so theirs could flourish. All those years, I was told to be grateful, to support Fiona. I was unknowingly financing the pedestal they'd built beneath her. The weight of that realization pressed down, then lifted into something new: resolve. I wasn't just the black sheep or the forgotten cousin. I was the key witness, the one who had lived through the bruises, emotional, financial, and professional that proved their cruelty. I closed my laptop slowly, steadying my breath. They didn't just hurt me, I thought. They built their entire story on what was supposed to be mine. For the first time, anger didn't make me tremble. It made me stand taller. I was no longer the girl stitching dresses in the dark, waiting for scraps of recognition. I was a woman with evidence, allies, and a voice I refused to mute. The erasure had been deliberate, but now my resistance would be too. The game had changed, and I wasn't playing for their approval anymore. I was playing for the truth. The morning after the wedding, my phone buzzed with my mother's name. Her voice, sharp and brittle, came through before I could even say hello. Fiona is devastated. She says you ruined her day. You canceled her dress at the last minute, didn't you? Was this your way of getting revenge? For a moment, I almost laughed, not out of humor, but out of the absurdity. Mom, I said evenly, I didn't cancel anything. Aunt Marlene returned the gown weeks ago. The dress Fiona wore? That wasn't mine. That was from the international designer you all chose to replace me with, wasn't it? The silence on the other end was telling. Heavy, suffocating, filled with everything she wanted to deny but couldn't. It wasn't just silence, it was guilt breathing down the line. I don't want to fight, Mom, I continued, my voice steady. I want the truth. That's all. There was a clatter, the muffled sound of the phone dropping, followed by Aunt Marlene's voice crashing through like glass shattering. What did you do? She demanded. Fiona is furious. Do you have any idea how much you've embarrassed this family? You've destroyed her wedding. I held the phone tighter, but my tone didn't change. No, Aunt Marlene, I didn't ruin anything. You did, when you decided I wasn't worthy of standing by her side. You and Mom set this up the moment you cut me out. All I've done is refuse to stay silent. And maybe you underestimated me. Because the gown you dismissed? The one you said wasn't good enough? It's worth $50,000 and it's on display at my gallery right now, along with the story of exactly what you did. For the first time, it was their turn to be silent. I could almost picture their faces, drained of color, eyes widening with the realization that the narrative had shifted beyond their control. For once, they weren't in charge of the story. The exhibition had opened quietly, almost without my notice, just a week earlier. I'd been working with a local curator who believed in my designs, someone who knew the hours of handwork, the passion behind each piece. When the curator saw the gown, she insisted it deserved its own pedestal, its own light. This isn't just fabric, she told me. This is a declaration. And so, there it stood. Fiona's gown, or rather, my gown, displayed beneath a plaque that read, Handcrafted Couture, value $50,000. The story accompanying it explained not only the artistry, but the betrayal, the way it had been rejected, hidden, and replaced. People walked through the gallery reading my words, not theirs. For once, the spotlight was on me. The timing couldn't have been sharper. Guests who had attended Fiona's wedding had also stopped by the exhibition that weekend, some out of curiosity, others out of loyalty to me. They saw both realities. Fiona in her glossy designer gown and the truth standing tall under gallery lights. The comparison was undeniable. When word began to spread, clients who had once hesitated to associate with me suddenly saw the value in my resilience. Commissions started to flow in, not just for dresses, but for full collections. Journalists picked up the story, not as a scandal, but as a narrative of reclamation. An artist denied her place at the family table who built her own stage instead. For the first time in years, I felt no need to prove myself at their dinner tables, no need to beg for approval from people who thrived on erasure. My worth wasn't measured by their applause anymore. It was written in contracts, etched in headlines, and stitched into every bead of that dress they had tried so hard to erase. When my mother called again days later, her tone was different, softer, almost pleading. Ocean, maybe we should talk. This has all gone too far. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't desperate either. Mom, I said. This didn't go too far. This finally went far enough. I'm not your scapegoat anymore. I'm not the problem you can erase. I'm the proof you couldn't silence. Hanging up, I didn't feel triumph the way I expected. I didn't feel rage or even satisfaction. I felt still. Still in the way a storm finally quiets after weeks of thunder. Still in the way a clock stops ticking when you take back control of the hands. It wasn't peace, exactly, but it was freedom. In the gallery photo taken that afternoon, I stand beside the gown, my shoulders square, my chin lifted. Behind me, blurred in the background, my mother and Aunt Marlene are caught mid-expression, their faces a mix of shock and fury as the crowd turned toward me instead of them. In my hand, I hold my phone, the screen glowing with an image of Fiona in her replacement dress. Two versions of the same story, one born of deception, the other of truth. That contrast told the world everything it needed to know. And in that moment, I understood. I hadn't just salvaged my dignity, I had reclaimed my narrative. I no longer carry the weight of being excluded. What once felt like rejection has become the foundation of my strength. I discovered that my worth isn't measured by a seat at their table, but by the work of my own hands, by the life I built without their approval. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't confrontation, it's shining so brightly that those who tried to erase you can no longer ignore you. And now I wonder, if you've ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you, would you stay silent, or would you rise and fight for your value? Share your story in the comments, because your voice matters here. And if my journey spoke to you, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Pain Files for more true tales of justice.